Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is the last session for today. We had a really busy first start of Wolf Summit. I'm here with Mark Masters, Hopin's VP of Finance, and Julian Beck, who's principal at Accel. Thank you for joining us, guys. How are you?
Thanks for having us, Diana.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone I think is looking forward to this session. And for anyone that it's new to this panel discussion, what we are exploring today in this conversation is essentially sharing some lesser known stories and insights of how you guys have got to where you are today, leading and investing in what is the fastest growing software company in history. Obviously we are in an industry that is changing so much, going through a lot of changes in the last year, the event industry, which Mark, obviously you've been active and you can share your experience from leading one of the largest event platforms. And then Julian, obviously as an investor, you've seen probably a lot of startups trying to pivot or adapt that previously worked in the event industry. So your thoughts on where this might lead to in the upcoming future might be also interesting to our audience. But before we jump into this changes, obviously the three of us, we had a short conversation just 3 weeks ago. And I remember, Mark, this was just before you guys have announced the $400 million fundraise. So congratulations on closing that last round. How does it feel to be leading the fastest growing software company?
It's been amazing. I've been here since June of last year, 2020. We were 60 people at that time, 5 million ARR, and now we're close to 500. In the 70 millions of ARR, and have done 4 acquisitions. So and have raised, the round we've raised. So we've been super fortunate. It's been an amazing ride. Can't say enough about the team and kind of the product and the opportunity that we have. It's been amazing.
So it's now 500, because I remember us talking about it 3 weeks ago, and we talked about how Johnny managed to grow the team from 6 to 400 employees and in just a matter of 12 months. And I guess we surpassed that headcount now to 500.
Yeah, it's accelerating. It's been insane. So it's been really fun. But yeah, we've crossed 500.
Awesome. So Mark, if we can stay with you for a second, because you arrived at Hopin at a time when the company was just establishing the structure, right? So you were the first finance executive to join the company and set up the infrastructure. How was it like to, and also given that you do have an eclectic background, but you also work for a lot of large companies, which implicitly there was structure before. How is it like to lead this past few rounds? And from where you stand as an entrepreneur, what do you believe are the most critical factors to consider when choosing, an investor, and what made
Yeah, I can speak to your first point. So I think there's a couple questions there. One is, what has it been like kind of going from, I used to work at Salesforce. We were 50,000 people, pretty established. That was kind of like my early introduction into tech after like a stint on Wall Street. And then I did a couple startups in between that were kind of 30 to 100 people and that kind of thing. So I've kind of had my battle scars at the startup level, and I've seen kind of how to operate at scale as well. So it's been interesting coming in, and so it wasn't really new to me seeing kind of where the company was at for 5 million ARR and 60 people. I think it was just how fast we had to grow and catch up, and we're still catching up kind of on the back end to a company that has ridiculous like product market fit. So that was a bit of a I'd seen it, but I think the pace over the last 9 months has just been like nothing I've ever seen or really anybody has seen. So it's been interesting kind of riding that wave. And I think the second part of your question was investors. So, I wasn't here when Accel joined, or Seedcamp was kind of our lead investor on the seed side, and Accel as well. I can just speak to kind of the partnership that we've had with Accel, and how useful they have been just to kind of let us kind of go and operate the business and just be incredibly supportive. So that's been a huge part of our relationship. And then any incremental investor that we come on really is got to understand our product and kind of how fast we move. We move really fast, but we're responsible. And it's great to have investors that really understand that.
Absolutely. And I think Mark, you said you obviously joined Hopin shortly after raising the initial round, but Julian, your collaboration with Hopin goes back to 2020, and you've led actually the seed round with Axo. I mean, obviously at the time and even now, Hopin by all means is not the only event platform out there, but what made you invest in Hopin from the early days? And I know we had an interesting conversation last time, the three of us, about how much you actually believed in the concept even before it was fully conceptualized. So maybe you can share some of those thoughts with the audience today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, actually we closed around in 2020, but we signed a term sheet in 2019. I think at the time, when kind of we look back, and I read the memo this morning just to sort of get the thoughts back into my head. It was a 4-people team with Johnny as the CEO. He was, I think, 24, 25 then. And the thing that sort of struck us when we first met Johnny was that he was just incredibly ambitious. He said, I think in our first meeting, we'll have failed if in 1 year we're not the fastest growing company in the world. And at the time it made us smile, but looking back, it was really spot on. Obviously at the time we didn't know that a global pandemic was around the corner. But when we invested for 8, 9, 10 years, so we look very long-term. We try to think, what does the world look like in a decade when, what categories will emerge? And we've been big backers of collaboration software businesses. We're the first investors in Slack and Atlassian, early in companies like Dropbox and Miro. And for us, it was really about seeing sort of those early signs of product market fit that got us really excited, and kind of looking at the future of events, saying, surely we'll have a big part remain in the offline world, but there's probably a share for online too. So what we didn't know is that, a decade of innovation would be brought forward, and that's why Hopin has been on such a high growth trajectory. So yeah, a very exciting journey so far.
I bet. I mean, I think people already sort of started counting at the many rounds that Hopin has closed, and I think it was just yesterday, something that we're actually going to probably discuss shortly in the conversation about how the market is actually coming together, consolidating. There was news yesterday that you guys have just finalized another acquisition round of, I think at this time it's Streamable in Jam. So congratulations on that one as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a busy couple of months here, that's for sure. But yeah, we're super excited to first start off with Topi, small acquisition there, and StreamYard was just transformational for us. And then really adding Streamable and Jam just really kind of solidifies our belief in and our doubling down in video, which is kind of where we want to go. And again, speaks to, Julian kind of mentioned it, like Johnny's vision and how quickly he wants to move. And again, we do it responsibly here. We do everything with purpose. And that's just another indication of kind of, that mantra.
Yeah. And you guys have been busy and you've kept us busy as well. Something that is probably not so well known is that in October last year, right after the event, the edition we run as a hybrid event, which we essentially took a leap of faith to run it, despite all the challenging times at that time when I think a lot of events unfortunately had to postpone. We also launched the event agency arm of Wolf Summit, and we were really fortunate to work really closely with Hopin and run events virtually for other leading organizations outside of Wolf Summit, which added a lot to our backlog of events as well. So just going quickly back on talking about investments, Julian, because a lot of the people actually tuning in to watch this session, it's startups. Startups at different stages of growth, and most of them are still dependent on risk capital to fund their growth, and quite anxious about access to capital because of the pandemic and what happened for the last year or so. So some may be raising their next round, some are in the midst of doing so, or others are just in doubt of that if that would happen at all. I'm curious from from your perspective as an investor, how has this crisis changed the investment landscape? Is it for Accel particularly? And do you think that VCs are more passive or operational? Are they focusing on the existing portfolio or looking for new opportunities?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, we had a bit of a fear that capital would dry out at the start of the pandemic. So I think, like many of our peers, we advise companies to be very cautious with regards to spending. But what happened in turn was that, I think we all saw that graph of e-commerce adoption just going, through the roof during the pandemic. I think that's a behavior we've noticed across the board. Just everyone had to survive by going digital. So we just had sort of this decade of innovation, kind of brought forward, as I said before. And I think not just in the events industry, but everyone had to sort of rewire how they operate. So from travel to food to telemedicine, we're just seeing so much innovation happen in a short time frame that, in fact, the pace has just accelerated. We've never deployed our funds at such a fast pace. And while some people are worried that we're in a bubble, we might be, but that there's still a lot of very good companies are being created just by all those changes in consumer habits. I think when a couple of years back, tech was just sort of a small sector of the economy, I think now people realize that it's bound to change, every aspect of our society. So there's just a lot of room to build companies there. And I'm just very bullish that we're at the start of the journey here.
Of course. And if we can maybe just build up on that point in terms of upcoming, or emerging trends that you've seen, or has there been a shift in terms of your geography focus? I know obviously the UK is still a huge market and one that presents a lot of opportunity, but with the recent changes and Brexit, I think actually a lot of investors might be looking towards Central Eastern Europe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the beauty now is that you can build a company from anywhere. Literally, there's no excuse not to be an entrepreneur today if you have access to a computer and you can code a little bit. That's the beauty. I think it's giving a chance to everyone out there to build a business. What actually, to go back to Hopin's case, when we first invested, we weren't sure whether Hopin would be sort of remote first or at least hybrid. But we realized that there was absolutely no way we could have built such a big company on such a short notice without hiring a distributed workforce. So, we built a lot of the go-to-market in the US. A lot of the tech talent has remained in Europe. So that sort of hybrid mode has been just transformational. And I think where a lot of companies have struggled to grow as fast as the market was pulling them, we've been able with Hopin to reach that sort of scale. And I think that's just one story of many successes that we'll see in the future. So I think, if anything, the center of power is being more distributed today. And we'll see companies being built, in multiple geos, and it'll become a bit less relevant.
Yeah. And I think also one trend investment-wise as well that I've seen and could also be interesting to anyone that is listening and wants to know more about it. There's a session tomorrow that I'm moderating on CVC. It's actually the rise of CVCs that has been happening in the last couple of years, and the CVC rounds happening at the same time with traditional VC investments. I thought it's interesting to mention because there is still a very kind of unpredictable climate right now, and despite this, there's still a lot of companies investing, a lot of huge corporations allocating funds towards this. And I was actually very surprised to see that also Hopin, Mark, has gone through such a deal with Salesforce Ventures, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, Salesforce and Slack have been some of the corporate VCs that we've leveraged. And I mean, Salesforce is one of the biggest investors out there. So I think there's a CNBC article out there a couple of weeks ago that indicated that they're one of the largest late stage growth investors out there. So we actually have a lot of Salesforce alumni on the team, and we love our friends at Salesforce.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, as Julian said, and you mentioned in the beginning, with your collaboration with Accel, it actually goes obviously beyond just financial support. You have strategic support, you have access to resources, and this is sometimes, depending on the stage of the growth of your startup, is probably even more relevant and more useful than just cash. If we can think now about where this industry, the event industry, could go to in the future. So having a future outlook and maybe sharing your thoughts, don't have to be very academic or research-based, but just your own experiences. Mark, we already talked about this latest acquisition that have been happening at Hopin. So it feels like there's a kind of consolidation within the events technology landscape. We might be going back to offline events at some point, but the virtual is definitely here to stay, as Julian said. What do you think are some of the trends that will be defining the event technology sector in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I mean, we're big believers in virtual, obviously, and then obviously big believers in video, and that's kind of what's driving our investments. And really what we're seeing is, Wolf Summit is a great case study, right? I mean, I think you used to run offline, and when the pandemic hit, you kind of had to pivot really quickly. Now you're virtual, and now you've been able to expand your audience really, really quickly, and probably have a broader kind of global scope, right? And we don't think that's going to go away. So I think the way we sort of think about it is we think events can be more accessible now, so that piece of pie can get bigger. And I think offline is going to be there. It's always going to be there, and we want that. We've always created this company for that. But we think there's a space here where you can have a virtual element too, for a lot of different reasons. Increase your scope. Having people not travel as much, or maybe they want to go to a live conference for a couple of days and then come back for their kids' soccer practice or whatever it is. Football for Europeans, sorry, but that's kind of what we believe in, and that's what's really pushing our investment and what we're seeing, for the next couple of years.
You did mention Wolf Summit, and I completely agree with you. I think we've also realized that everyone probably wants to go back to having offline events and meeting in person. We've seen that desire in October last year when we were still in lockdown, and we had a hybrid event, but we also realized that virtual is definitely something for the future as well. We were catching up actually with Brian from Hopin, one of your colleagues, the other day, going through some of our engagements and working with different partners. And I'm absolutely thrilled to hear about the positive responses that we've received from different organizations. I didn't even know that there is an NPS score of 83, but apparently that exists. We have it. So we're extremely happy with working with Hopin, and also maybe something that the audience might hear more about after the event. We have plans as well of leveraging this virtual element in trying to unify the Central Eastern European event market. I think there's currently so many interesting conferences happening now I'm sitting with you in Warsaw, in Wrocław, and normally also from Poland, but we have conferences happening in Romania, Ukraine, Bulgaria, Baltics as well. And everyone is trying to support the ecosystem here. And I think what we're trying to say, we want to bring everyone together. We want to launch something that would be an actual Tech Week program, and doing all these local and national events at the same time. And obviously with the support of Hopin, which I think is fantastic, one can be achieved, something that probably nobody thought that could be possible probably 2-3 years ago, right?
Yeah, I love to for me to be able to participate. I'm in Austin, Texas, you're in Warsaw. I just had a baby like 2 weeks ago, so I would have never been able to fly to Warsaw and be part of this. So it's like, that just gives me that flexibility to be able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the beauty of it. Obviously, we're mindful that after a full year, these are not normal times, right? So being kind of just stuck behind a computer, sometimes people do feel the need of meeting in person. So I think that's probably the future is going to be hybrid. The future is going to be virtual events to reach audiences and meet the way we're doing right now. I mean, Julian, you are in London, I assume. Is that
at the moment I'm actually in Barcelona.
Oh, right. Okay. So we were having a conversation a few weeks ago. You were in London. Now you're in Barcelona. And Mark, you're in Austin, right? In Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Yep.
Awesome. And yeah, I'm in Rostov, so that's amazing. But at the same time, I think more exclusive, smaller, intimate events, I think they're also going to come more into prominence very soon. Julian, just to also sum up on this question, what are your thoughts on the outlook of investments in B2B trade events and in-person conferences? Would a company like AXO would be ever looking to invest in a conference or in a hybrid event now?
Yeah, look, for us, we've always invested in a lot behind three categories of companies, one being software, the other consumer and fintech. So we'll remain in this realm. But I think with regards to events, I think, we've got a great horse with Hopin, and, the company is so ambitious that it wants to go after every bit of the event industry, and, we're fully supportive. There's just a lot of potential, not just to replace what wasn't working with the offline, but to go beyond. I think very similar to you, when we invested in Hopin, we spoke to some of the beta customers, and we were very surprised that a lot of them were using the product every day. And when we spoke to them, it was a lot of very similar cases to you that said, we used to run our events offline, and suddenly with the pandemic, we had to go online. And when we asked them whether they would shift back or not, they said that now they don't need tens of people on the ground to run their events. They can just do it online and reach wider audiences. And they compared it to the shift from offline advertising to online advertising, because you can get a lot more insights from your audience. So there's definitely a big future for online only. But as people go back to your point, we think that hybrid will remain sort of a core component of the event industry, and we're fully behind that.
Yeah, and I think what you kind of hit the nail on the head as well with the analytics and the stats. It's something extremely important, and we were actually, Mike and I, we were looking at some of the real stats behind in Hopin as this happens, and obviously good stats, good figures so far for a first day, having over 2,000 people registering, and a lot more actually coming in tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know we are approaching the end of the slot, and I just wanted to say thank you both for running and investing in a great company, and for sharing your thoughts as well experiences with the founders joining us today. If you have a bit more time to stay with us, there's a networking session as well made available in Hopin. So please do stay. And for anyone that has been listening, this is the last session of today, but we have the startups pitching as well. So Julian, that might be also interesting for you. And
Absolutely.
Tomorrow we're back again with many more stages and talks as well about investments. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us today.
Very cool. Thanks, Diana, for having us. Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. This was great.
Thank you. Thank you.